Hey everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia back with the 2024 Bengals schedule release edition of the Jungle Roar Pod, powered by Prize Picks and Game Time. I have a special guest joining me here on this Wednesday evening, less than an hour after the big news came out at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Joe Danneman, the sports director of Fox 19. Why is he a relevant guest, you ask? Well, not just because he is a tremendously talented anchor on Fox 19 and tremendously talented reporter, but he is also sports director of the station that is the new flagship station of Bengals TV coverage here in Cincinnati. So, Joe Danneman, welcome. And I haven't had a chance since the big news broke to congratulate you and the station on becoming the new flagship of the Bengals.
Well, thank you, Trags. A big responsibility comes with that big title. We have a lot of special programming planned for starting at training camp, but all throughout the season, where we have an hour of special programming each week, partly on Friday, partly on Sunday throughout the week, to give Bengals fans more of a taste of the personality of the guys. I know everybody gets to see them play on the field. They can see all of our interviews throughout the week, talking about the games and the big storylines. I want these shows we're doing here for the Bengals as the flagship station to really showcase the personalities in that room. And you look at the new rookie class, and we've gotten a taste already of the big personalities the Bengals have brought in just this year. So I can't wait to go ahead and start to showcase this coming season in our first year as the flagship.
And you better be starting at the top in terms of personality, Chris Jenkins. You and I both agree he is right at the top of the list.
He is number one. In fact, to your point, after we finished up our interview with him at rookie camp, I sat down in the chair next to him and started going over ideas for segments for him specifically. Excellent. I have some great ideas because, look, here's a young guy that's in Cincinnati for the first time. The idea is going to be to take him to all these different places all over town and let him experience it for the first time and let the viewers experience it, what it's like for him, whether it's a Reds game, an FC Cincinnati game, Skyline Graders, you name it, the parks, the museums, all these great Cincinnati places. We're going to take him all over town, have a great time with him.
The Sign Museum, you got to take him to the Sign Museum.
I've never been to the Sign Museum. So
as a matter of fact, neither have I. For the record, full disclosure, I have never been there. It's one of those things, it's weird to me, Joe. And I know we'll get to the schedule in just a second, but all of the national broadcasts always show that as an excerpt of some of the highlights that make Cincinnati, and uniquely Cincinnati. I've never been there, and I'm glad to hear you say the same, that you've never been there either.
So they have two home primetime games against Washington, against Cleveland. Trags, I'm thinking one of those, if not both of those, will have a bump shot coming back from a commercial of the signs here in Cincinnati, because they always do. It's a great shot. It's a really interesting shot.
It is.
And I've never been there, and I feel ashamed of that.
Well, you're not alone in your shame, as I just mentioned. Okay, let's get to the schedule, and we'll start off Sunday, September 8th. We go back to 2001. And, obviously we remember what happened on 9/11, but, I believe it was 9/11, 2 days prior to that, on September 9th, they opened with the New England Patriots. This year, they're again opening, this time at Paycor Stadium, not Paul Brown Stadium, against the New England Patriots. That was Bill Belichick's second year with the Patriots. This will be the first year of Gerard Mayo as head coach of the New England Patriots, taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Nothing is a guarantee. But when you take a look at the turnover that the Patriots are going through, it's probably going to be Jacoby Brissett at quarterback and not Drake May, their number one, their first round pick.
Yeah, I remember that game back in 2001 being one of the hottest games I've ever gone to in the NFL. It was scorching hot, and Cincinnati didn't go well for the Bengals. The Patriots were a better team. They won the game. But I think you hit on a point there about Jacoby Brissett, because when the schedule came out, I saw a lot of people react that the Bengals are going to face rookie quarterbacks in 2 of the first 3 weeks. And I pushed back on that a little bit and said, I would be surprised
Right.
if Jacoby Brissett wasn't the starting quarterback for New
They
England.
did not sign him for $7 million, whatever it is, to sit on the bench and do nothing at the beginning. I
Correct.
think he is going to be the quarterback. He knows New England, obviously different coaching staff now, but he does know New England. I think the Crafts brought him back to kind of transition Drake May into the starting job, not throw him to the Wolves, especially considering what the Patriots offensive line was like at the end of last year, which is to say not good. By the way, that 2001 game, the Bengals won 23-17. They beat Drew Bledsoe and the Patriots in that game. And the Bengals started 2-0 in 2001.
Okay.
2001, 2-0, and then obviously struggled thereafter, and I think finished 5-11 or 6-10. Can't remember, but yes, the Bengals won that game against Belichick's Patriots, the first of the 6 New England Super Bowl championship teams.
Good knowledge, Trags. Thanks for correcting me on that. I think, though, when you look at the New England game this year, and the big talking point throughout the offseason, and we'll continue in training camp, and we'll see what it looks like when we get there in a couple of months, is the fast start, right? That's been the one thing that Bengals fans have been talking about that has to change this coming year. Now, I'll make a counterpoint to the idea that a fast start is a must. The Bengals are 6-5 in September, Trags, the last 3 years. And those 3 years include a Super Bowl appearance, an AFC Championship appearance, and then last year would have been a playoff appearance if Joe Burrow didn't get hurt midway through the season. So the question really begs itself, is a fast start absolutely necessary? It's not. It's not. However, the way the schedule is set up for the Bengals this year, I do think they have to bank some wins early when you're talking about playing a New England team that the Bengals have a better roster than. And then week 2, obviously Kansas City. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here and ruin your podcast if we want to go game by game. But you start going
I have you on. I have you on for your vast knowledge. Go.
Yeah, when you start ticking down the games here, Trags, you go week 3, Washington, home. That's going to be a rookie quarterback. I do think Jaden Daniels will play in that game.
Yes, I do too.
Quarterback. Then you're playing at Carolina with a second-year quarterback and a Carolina team that is still in the rebuilding phase. So when you start 3 of the first 4 weeks, when the quarterbacks are Jacoby Brissett, a rookie, and a second-year quarterback who didn't do much his rookie season, there's a really good chance here that even if the Bengals don't have their A game in September, that they can get off to a great start. And then who's to say they won't go to Kansas City and win? We've seen them do that before. So while I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here, I think the overall philosophy for me is when I saw the schedule come out tonight, I said, Bengals, don't change a thing for what your plan is at training camp. Don't go hard, full throttle, prepared to get off to this fast start, and then not be able to have the gas in the tank at the end of the season. If that's their philosophy, and that's what they've used the last 3 years, I think this schedule sets up for this team to do the same thing this year, to give themselves the best chance to have as full of a healthy roster at the end of the season as they can.
Mike Petralia, Trags here. I want to tell you about Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on all the action while you watch your favorite sports and, of course, players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can win now up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You heard that right, with as few as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. This week for me, I'm taking Kevin Durant for more than 28 points and Trae Young for more than 10 assists. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And to your point, Joe Danneman, sports director of Fox 19, the new Bengals flagship station of local coverage. To your point, I think the schedule is going to give Joe Burrow a chance to work himself up to full strength by his own admission. And you were there for this a couple of weeks ago, Joe, when he acknowledged that it's probably going to be a year, just like with a knee injury, he thinks, to get that wrist back to 100%. And if that's the case, he's still going to be working through at least some soreness after some of these games. But he's going to be playing. I mean, barring anything else happening, knock wood, barring anything else happening, he should be playing. But it's going to give the Bengals a chance to get some of these rookies engaged, where I think in years past, when the Bengals are starting at Cleveland and home to Baltimore last year, there was more of an urgency, and a guy like Lou Anarumo can't stand throwing rookies into the fire right away. He just doesn't want to do it. Maybe against this kind of competition, you can do that. I will tell you what sticks out to me more than anything else about this schedule. The Bengals play the NFC North this year. 3 of the 4 games that they play, and that would be home to Washington, at the Giants October 13th, and at Dallas on Monday night, December 9th. They're all primetime games. 2 of those primetime games on the road, at the Giants on a Sunday night and at Dallas on a Monday night. Those are difficult games for logistics. How do you read that?
I look at it for that reason, looking at not just the primetime games, but also those spotlight 425 games. So in a 17-game schedule, Trags, 8 of the 17 are either primetime or in that 425 spotlight window. So what I read from the NFL schedule is the NFL knows what they have in the Cincinnati Bengals, and that's a product that should be watched nationally. And so that's
with
what
Burrow back, obviously.
With Joe Burrow back. 5 primetime games and then 3 425 games. So the NFL wants to put Joe Burrow on TV, as they should this season. So that was one of my takeaways. The other one, too, is this, Trags. And you look at this from start to finish, and then you compare it to some of the other schedules in the AFC North. I talked about this at the end of the year when we saw the playoffs weren't going to happen, that maybe the Bengals had some wins in the margins with what happened last year. Now, certainly you don't want your quarterback to go down, and you don't want to give away a season like the Bengals did in the prime of Joe Burrow's career, but that happened. But here are the wins in the margin for the last year. They keep their defensive coordinator. Lou Anarumo is still here. So that's a win in the margin. By finishing where they finished, they get a higher draft pick. They pick 18th, and Amarius Mims has looked pretty excellent from the short stint we've seen him so far here in Cincinnati. So they get a higher draft pick and a better chance to solidify your offensive line. And then the third is what we're talking about tonight, and that is a softer schedule than anybody else in the AFC North. Baltimore has 7 primetime games. The Pittsburgh Steelers finish with these 4. Listen to these 4 the Steelers finish with: Philly, Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati, to finish out the season in the stretch where you're trying to make the playoffs. So you talk about winning in the margins, what the Bengals were able to win by losing out on last season and losing out on a chance to go to the playoffs. You keep your defensive coordinator, you get a better draft pick, and you get an easier schedule. And that lines up for the Bengals to take a jump this year, I think, with this schedule.
I would agree with you. Let's move on to the Brian Callahan Bowl. That will come in week 14, if I'm doing my math correctly. Sunday, December 15th at Tennessee. That's just a bland 1:00 game. And you know what? It is on Fox 19. It is right now. It could always get flexed, of course. But right now, that Brian Callahan Bowl, Brian Callahan against his former boss, and that would be Zach Taylor, 1:00 on Fox 19, December 15th. What do you think?
So there are a couple of games on this, actually several games on this schedule that I can hop into my car, close my eyes, and drive to without even having to look. We've done them so many times. Obviously Cleveland, obviously Pittsburgh, obviously Baltimore. But Kansas City, we go back again for what? The 4th consecutive year. Yep. And now Tennessee, is this the 4th consecutive year as well? 3rd consecutive year.
3rd, but 4th if you include the playoff game in 2021. So yeah, 4.
There you go. Yeah, 4.
Correct.
In a great time of year, I think, for Bengals fans, if you're looking for the out-of-town trip right around Christmas time to go to Music City, Nashville. I know it will be chilly. It'll be cold in Nashville, but it's such a fun town, and that's such a fun place to be that time of year. I think that's a great trip for Bengals fans. I think that's going to be an interesting game, and not just for the Brian Callahan, Zach Taylor, but I think Tennessee has a sneakier roster than people might be giving them credit for. Now, we all understand, can Will Levis be the guy that can lead this team to a successful season? We'll see. I think that's a big-time question mark, but I do think with the changeover from Derrick Henry, and now you have a new running back, and now you have a younger roster, I do think there's a chance here for Tennessee to be a surprise contender for the playoffs in the AFC South. Watch out for them this year. Watch out for that game being, I hate the word. It's one of the ugly four-letter words. Talk about schedules.
It's a T word.
It's the trap game, right? Right there between Dallas and Cleveland is right there, that game against Tennessee. But I do think they're a better roster than people give them credit for, and they will be up for that game with the Bengals coming to town again for a fourth consecutive year.
Hey, it's Trags, Mike Petralia, host of the Code Reds podcast and Jungle Roar podcast on the CLNS Media Network. What a great time of year to be a basketball fan. The NBA playoffs finally here and in full swing. I watch them every single night, but you know what's better than watching those playoff games on TV? Actually taking in all the fun and excitement in person. What's the best way to do that? Well, Game Time is my go-to. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and, yes, easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, how about this? Views from your seat and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all of the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Myself, I'm thinking of going up I-74 to take in an Indiana Pacers playoff game. Couldn't be easier with Game Time. They've got last-minute deals, save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, but also concerts, comedy, and theater. With Game Time's ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. By the way, the TB game, Tyler Boyd is also will be a part of that storyline on December 15th at Tennessee. Your thoughts on TB and his a terrific gesture towards the organization and to the people of Cincinnati this week?
Yeah, a great Bengal, and I think that's what we'll remember him as. I was having a debate with someone at work the other day if he'll be a Ring of Honor Bengal. I don't think he's there. I think he's one rung below that. But you talk about a guy, and he often talked about this too, was a player that experienced pre-Zach Taylor, Zach Taylor's first year, and then Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow together. So he was one of the guys that had to climb through the 6 feet of mud to come out on the other side and experience the Super Bowl season. You think back to some of his great moments, obviously the catch in Baltimore that sent Buffalo.
That's number one to me, by the way.
It's number one. But what I always take from Tyler Boyd was his unending confidence in not only himself, but his teammates and the organization, that even when the Bengals were in the midst of Zach Taylor's first year and not winning any games, his confidence from week to week never changed. And he had a vision for what this team and that locker room could be. And he was one of those guys that helped elevate this team to where they were and where they are now. So what I'll always take away from Tyler Boyd are the moment, obviously, against the Baltimore Ravens, and then his unending confidence that he always had, even despite the lean years that he was part of. He and Joe Mixon were two guys that had kind of seen it through from the one side to the other. They're both now obviously gone, but they were guys that were here for a long time that experienced both sides of the losing and winning.
We will not see Joe Mixon, at least in the regular season, because the Houston Texans are not on the 2024 Bengals docket. Wrapping up here about Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd had an immense impact on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at the start of their career, and there was no more poignant indication of that than what Jake Browning said at the end of last year when he kind of sensed that Tyler Boyd had played his final game in Bengal stripes, and he took about 30 to 45 seconds, a heartfelt statement of appreciation to Tyler Boyd. Were you there at his locker when he said that? I don't know if I remember you being around, but it was a very powerful, for a backup quarterback who is pretty straightforward, plays it pretty straight. He was very emotional about it, and to see them embrace literally on camera as other cameras were rolling, it was quite the moment after the Browns game.
I was not there for it, Trags. I did see it on video, and I think your point is well taken on what he meant to this team, the moments he had. Certainly, Bengals fans will look back at Tyler Boyd and they'll remember a guy out of the second round, and the second round has been so good to this organization over the last 20, 25 years, even going back to Corey Dillon. I remember his first training camp practice, and there wasn't an expectation that Tyler Boyd was going to develop into the guy he did. There was a thought that him coming out of the second round that, he would be a solid player, a guy that could help this team. We talked to Adam Pac-Man Jones after his first training camp practice, and he said Tyler Boyd runs routes like he's a Cadillac. He's that smooth. And from then on, my antenna went up that if Pac-Man's going to single this kid out and say he looked that good in his first practice training camp, and Pac is not going to say that about somebody unless he truly means it. That one stuck with me, that from day one, he was turning heads here in Cincinnati, that he was going to be a really good football player, and he was. He had some big-time moments. Not only the moment in Baltimore that sent Buffalo to the playoffs, the Joe Burrow Bowl in Miami. He had some big plays in that game in which the Bengals almost won.
You could argue he almost cost the Bengals Joe Burrow.
Yes, he did, but he didn't. But you can now fondly remember the fact that he made some big plays in that game as well.
All right, let's see. There is the at Carolina game's a Fox game. The game at Paycor against Vegas, Michael Mayer and Covcast, Michael Mayer, right? That game's on Fox. That's Sunday, November 3rd. And then the game December 15th is a Fox game as well. There are two TBDs. That's weeks 17 and 18, home against Denver. And the Bengals finish up the 2024 campaign on January 4th or 5th against at Pittsburgh against the Steelers. Something that sticks out to me is how late the bye is. The bye is November 24th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. That's a lot of football. And I know Joe Burrow made reference to this when he was asked last week about the big ask of, the Bengals or of the NFL going to an 18-game schedule. And he mentioned how many games that would be played if there's only one bye in that schedule. And that's why a lot of people are pushing for two. But the Bengals are going to play, and I have to count these, so forgive me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They play 11 games before they get their bye.
And it's right in the middle, Trags, of what I think is going to be the defining 2-month stretch of the Bengals schedule, which is weeks 7 through week 14. And that starts at Cleveland. Then it's Philly. Then it's Las Vegas, who is sneaky good. Then it's at Baltimore, at the Chargers, new coach, Justin Herbert. Then you have the bye. Then coming out of the bye, it's Pittsburgh and Dallas. So you talk about a stretch on the schedule right there where you're going to be tested heavily. To put the bye in the bye, yes, it is late. It is late, but to put the bye in the middle of that stretch, I think, is a good place for that to be before you come back and play Pittsburgh and Dallas. And then also,
if the Bengals can stay healthy, that's my big concern.
The other concern would be in December, there is a 3-game stretch in 10 days. which will be difficult in December. So while we talked about the slow start and how will that affect, or the fast start, if you want to say it that way, and how that'll affect training camp, this thing starts to get loaded in the middle of the schedule, and then certainly it can be a challenge in December. I do think it's a bit of a break for the Bengals, that understanding coin flip week 18, right? A lot of times week 18, one of the two teams has nothing to play for, so you don't get their best. So to have Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh in week 18 is a possible game that could be of no consequence to one of the two teams. I think that's a win for the Bengals when you start talking about the small wins you can find in the schedule. To have Pittsburgh backloaded in week 13 and then play them week 18, where one of the two teams, or maybe even both of the two teams, might not have a lot to play for at that point. I think that could be a win for the Bengals as well.
Back in 2022, I'm sure you remember this, and Bengal fans will as well. Bengals opened with Pittsburgh for the first time ever at home, lost that game, obviously, in overtime. Then they went to Dallas and lost on a last-second field goal. So, ironically, history is repeating itself only several months later into the schedule. 2 years later, the Bengals are playing at home against Pittsburgh and then on the road at Dallas. It's just kind of weird how schedule quirks work out that way. But that 3-game in 10-day stretch you're talking about is Monday, December 9th at Dallas. Following Sunday, a short week at Tennessee, as we mentioned, the Brian Callahan, Tyler Boyd Bowl. And then they turn around and just 4 days later, they play at home against Cleveland, a division, a fierce division rival. That is a tough 10-day stretch.
So you play at Dallas, at Tennessee, you're banged up, and then you turn around and play one of the most physical football teams in the NFL on a short week, and what potentially could be a seeding game, could be a divisional championship affecting kind of game. That's a stretch right there in December to circle and remember when we get there in about 7 months. But yeah, that week 7 through 14, that leads right into that 10-day stretch. So it's a little bit like last year where there was that gauntlet in the middle. I don't think it's that level of what we saw last year and what we prepared for when the Bengals were playing that middle portion of the schedule. But I do think there's some landmines right here in the back half of the schedule. Understanding Denver probably shouldn't be great. I think we're all in agreement that Denver should be a team that doesn't make the playoffs. To have that week 17 right there as a chance for a winnable game, I think is a nice little thing to keep in your back pocket as maybe a win that you can put in the clubhouse before you even get there. And then, of course, as we talked about with week 18, who knows if either team will have anything to play for in that game. So there is a bit of a breather, perhaps, at the end of the season after you talk about that tough middle and that tough 10-day stretch in December.
All right, we're going to wrap it up here, Joe. I really appreciate your time. But before we go, I want to get your feel on the sense that you have for this schedule, what kind of results there'll be. I'm not going to go win, loss, win, win, win. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say it feels like 12-5 to me right now. That's what it feels like to me. 12-5 is very doable out of this schedule. And I think if you do go 12-5, given what you've already mentioned about the rest of the AFC North, I think that can win you the AFC North.
No question. And I think the word I would use, Trags, is favorable. This felt like a favorable schedule for me, for the Bengals, considering their philosophy in training camp. And we'll see if it changes, that no matter what they do in training camp, it does set up for them to show up the first several weeks and have a very good chance against New England, against Washington, against Bryce Young in Carolina. I won't put a number on it, like 12 wins or 11 wins, but I'll say this about the number. You think back to last year, the schedule that we thought they were going to play and how hard it was for a first-place schedule and the way it was setting up. And then they lost Joe Burrow halfway through the season, and they still won 9 games, right? They still won 9 games last year. So if you take – and all we can do is project out healthy quarterbacks and healthy rosters when we look at this schedule. So if you project Joe Burrow for 17 games, you're talking, right, minimum of 10 to 11 wins. And if they play well and get off to a fast start like we think they can, certainly 12 is very doable. 12 almost seems like the number that I would target if I just kind of closed my eyes and threw darts at this thing. I would say 12 is probably the number that I would put the Bengals at. Now, certainly Baltimore playing a first-place schedule and playing 7 primetime games and having a bye week in week 14. The Baltimore Ravens have their bye week in week 14. That's difficult. So they've got a lot of things stacked up against them. So if we believe that Baltimore and the Bengals are the 1 and 1A horses for the AFC North, Baltimore's got it lined up really difficult this year with a tough schedule right off the bat, going to Kansas City week 1 and then having that late bye. There's a really good chance here that, 12 wins might be the number that wins the AFC North this season.
3 preseason games, Joe Danneman. August 10th, the preseason gets underway as Saturday evening at Paycor against Tampa Bay. That's on the Fox 19 Bengals preseason TV network. Saturday, August 17th at Chicago, Soldier Field at 1 o'clock. That is also on your airwaves, Bengals preseason TV network. And then Thursday, August 22nd, the preseason winds up at Paycor against the Indianapolis Colts, a preseason rivalry renewed, if you will, the I-74 rivalry. Bengals haven't done that the last several years, but that is back this year, 8 o'clock. Now, that's on Prime Video. Could it be wind up on your airwaves? Waiting to see.
We will have a meeting later this week to discuss being able to broadcast that locally. The way it typically sets up, if you think about it here in Cincinnati, I know you and I are at the games, but whenever the Bengals are on Thursday night or the Bengals are on ESPN on Monday night, one of the local affiliates simulcasts it. So I would think we have a very good chance of getting a simulcast, considering we have it under contract to air all of the Bengals preseason games. I would think so. I don't want to say for sure until I talk to our general manager, but I would think that would line up for the 3 preseason games and then the 3 regular season games on Fox as well, and then all the big-time programming we're doing throughout the year.
And also a chance here, Joe Danneman, to promote your new talent that you just brought on board. I met her at Paycor this week in talking to the rookies and watching the full squad practice. Tell us a little bit about her.
So we have 2 actually starting here. We have one started this week. Another will start the first week of July. So Gabby Sorrentino has just started. Gabby is coming to us from a station in Carbondale, Illinois, where she covered local college sports, high school sports, dipped into the St. Louis Cardinals a little bit for some professional sports. She's joining the team. And then in July, we have a young lady named Reagan Holgate, who is coming to us from the northern part of the state of Illinois, Rockford, Illinois, where she has extended experience covering the Chicago Bears. So for her to come from covering the Bears now to the Bengals, I think is going to be a jump in excitement, expectations certainly, although I think expectations and excitement are probably pretty high with Caleb Williams and the weapons he has now. But this established star power in Cincinnati is going to be a difference for her. So Gabby and Reagan are joining both Jeremy and I to have a 4-member team at Fox 19 Now Trags for the first time since Dan Horde was there back in 2008. We had 4 people. Brian Giesenslaw of the Reds pregame and postgame show, Dan Horde, the voice of the Bengals, were our 2 on-air talents, and then I was one of the producers. So for us to go to a 4-man team, 4-person team for the first time in a long time is a big deal for us.
I appreciate all that you do on Fox 19, Joe. You do a wonderful job, and I also appreciate you taking time out just after the schedule was released. This is a special edition of the Jungle Roar pod, and you certainly made it worthwhile. I appreciate you joining me, Joe.
Anytime, Trags. You're one of the best to be around in Cincinnati and the media. We have a great time together. So to hop on here and talk for a half hour about the schedule, I think it's a fun night and a fun way to look at this and kind of try to break it up into big segments, big chunks with this chance here for the Bengals to get off to a fast start for once in 2024.
All right. He is Fox 19 Sports Director Joe Danneman. Fox 19, the flagship of Cincinnati Bengals TV coverage in 2024. I want to thank our sponsors, Prize Picks and Game Time, for their loyal support, as always, of the Jungle Roar podcast powered by CLNS Media. Until next week, keep that jungle roaring. Joe, you knocked it out of the park.
Trags, you're the GOAT, man.
That was tremendous.
That was fun.
All right. I got to wrap it up here and get this out. So I will let you go.
See you, man.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, Joe.
You got it.